Well, we have lived to broadcast another day here. Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi uh, on the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
And Joe Rayo here. Joe, 1 month now past the astronomical start of the winter season. We passed the halfway point a few days ago of meteorological winter, and now we're exactly 1 month past the astronomical start of winter, January 21st, back a month, December 21st.
And those who reside in the I-95 corridor have been are waving the white flags now, left and right. I will just mention I tend to be a little cynical about this sort of stuff. There's a shocker there.
Yeah,
Um, But there are two raging snowballs out there that have essentially thrown in the towel. I'm not going to say who. Okay, everybody can just do the math and figure it out themselves. But two raging snowballs that are out there that have thrown in the towel at least through the month of February, if not for the rest of the winter. So, if you believe in contrary indicators, there's your good sign. Okay, there right there is your good sign that things will change. But other than that very cynical view, it's funny, Joe. We went from really a rather ugly weather pattern that we had for snow lovers anyway, from right before Christmas till about a week or so ago, and it was a pattern where the only way it would really be able to snow is if you timed everything just perfectly, and cold air coming in and out, maybe a little system coming in and out, and they would just kind of time out together. And we had one of those back in early January, but now we've gone to a pattern change that is just horrible in a different way. You've got this really active southern stream jet that's moving these weather systems along now, but the problem is that the Arctic is completely cut off from the flow. There's no real Arctic air anywhere coming into the United States. You've got at best, I guess you might want to call it dirty polar air that is bleeding down, and that's about it. So there are probably 100 different ways that you can set up a weather pattern that would be unfavorable for snow, and maybe about a dozen that are favorable. And unfortunately, we've gone from one unfavorable one to another unfavorable one.
well, it's the first half of the month of January was like literally like a blowtorch, and we've gotten into a little bit of a colder weather regime now these past few days. But unfortunately, as you just alluded to, as we move toward the end of this month, it looks like we're once again going to be dealing with above normal temperatures. In fact, the Climate Prediction Center has both on their 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlook above normal temperatures throughout much of the northern tier states, taking us all the way out on the 8 to 14 model to the 4th of February, the day of the halfway point of astronomical winter, and also the day when Mr. Cioffi will be giving his first library talk of the season at 2 o'clock in the afternoon
Right.
at the Sachem Public
That's
Library.
right. In Holbrook, New York. That's on February 4th. And again,
Right.
it's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I will not be live streaming it. Um, yeah. You also might notice somebody, I didn't check myself, but I think they also updated. When CPC changed their outlook for January and February and March last back late December, early January, to below normal temperatures, that should have been taken as a horrible sign. And in fact, today I think they revised the days of date on the 20th or the 21st when they revised the monthly outlooks, and now they have February as above normal, and I think they might actually have it above normal for a large chunk of the U.S. for the whole month.
Actually, actually, Joe, the 1 month outlook, which was put out by the CPC on January 16th,
Okay.
just a few days ago, they have in the Northeast marginally below normal.
Oh, really? So I guess I must have misinterpreted what the map was. Maybe it was the always experimental 8 to 14 day or whatever. Is that the experimental one?
Well, on the experimental one, the 3 to 4 week outlook, and that
Oh,
takes us through the first half of February, all the way
okay.
to Valentine's Day, half the country is under below normal temperatures.
So then I must have been mistaken that for the shorter range ones. Doesn't matter. They changed it to below normal. You can rest assured that that's another contrary indicator in the other direction. How about we go to where there actually is some winter weather today? Would you like to see where there's some winter
Yes,
weather today?
would like to see that indeed.
Okay, so 1 second. I'm going to there we go. I'm going to bring it up here. And we are going to go to, of all places,
Miami, Florida.
yes, we're going to South Florida, where it's 60 degrees right now in excuse me in Miami, and they have a wind chill advisory up, saying
That's
that the winds are going to make it feel like it's 25 to 30 overnight. Read
oh,
it, read it and weep, folks. You got a wind chill advisory in South Florida. Now, uh, there was actually with a certain wind direction, Lake Okeechobee actually impacts the temperatures in South Florida and makes it a little warmer. But if we go up, I'll just jump up. I'll go north up toward let's see, to Tampa. So Tampa right now is, believe it or not, their observation is smoke and 50. So either there are a bunch of people smoking cigars all over the place, or I'm not sure why. There's some kind of wildfire maybe going on, because in all seriousness, because I just remembered they do have red flag warnings up for parts of this zone. At least they did earlier. Hard freeze warnings for Ocala and Gainesville. Okay, and we have a regular, just a plain old, not so hard freeze warning for the areas surrounding that. So there's your winter weather, folks, in relative terms. This is and by the way, they did issue special weather statements warning people that it may be cold enough so that lizards will freeze in place and fall from the trees.
a
I'm serious. I'm not making this up. This is the
lizard warning.
Yes. There's a lizard warning in effect. Correct.
You just mentioned about the smoke. I've just brought up from the cleardarksky.com site. They give you the NOAA smoke map, and while I don't see smoke, what I can tell you is that it looks like on this map, Florida's burning up. Apparently there's some wildfires all over the state of Florida, and even on into southern sections of Georgia and even parts of South
All
Carolina.
right, so then that must be the case.
Yeah,
Something must be going on. They don't have anything up other than the freeze stuff going on in the watches and warnings. But I did see a red flag warning up. I guess the freezes are taking precedent, but I did see red flag warnings up for some of these zones down here. Let me just see if they're listed on the sidebar, because sometimes they are. Uh, Oh, they must have taken it down. I guess after sunset they took it down. Oh well.
usually they do. Usually they do. But if it's
The
I'll tell you, if it's as fiery as I see it on this map, then they may have red flag warnings. Although, up here, what our weather service likes to do is that after a red flag warning expires, they already put a red flag watch into effect
for the
for the next
next
day.
right,
So,
right. Well, oh well, it's still pretty quiet everywhere else, Joe. Though we have the first winter weather advisories up for Kansas, eastern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, much of the state of Missouri, including St. Louis, and a good chunk of the state of Iowa. So this is ahead of the next storm system that's going to be impacting our weather here in the east, and an early look at what is forecast for snow from a coating to an inch in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and looking at 1 to 4 inches from Kansas across into Missouri, and then you start to get into some 5, 6, and 7 inch amounts when you head further north into Iowa. 4 to 5 across Wisconsin. Looks like they're going for 4 in Chicago, 3 in Milwaukee, 5 in Rockford, Illinois, 4 in Green Bay, and then 1 to 2 on the lower peninsula side of Michigan, and out in the west, where we still have energy coming in and the never-ending snowfall that occurs up in the Cascades, where another 71 to 110 inches are forecast well to the east of Seattle and Olympia. And then we also have some rather vigorous amounts of snow, 5 to 15 inches across northern Idaho into northwestern Montana. So that's where all the action is. Also seeing a little bit of snow west of Denver. Denver forecast to get a coating to an inch, but west and north of Denver, some isolated pockets of 5 to 10 inches there. Also down into parts of northern New Mexico, a little bit of snow nonsense across northern Nevada and excuse me, down through the Sierra Nevadas in California. So that pretty much sizes it up. And with this next storm, by the way, coming to the east, Mr. Rayo, and the fact that we are going to see really a minimal amount of cold air around. Some of that high is going to press into the north, but it's not going to be enough to cause impact downstate. But upstate, northern Pennsylvania on up through interior New York State into interior New England, this could wind up being a sizable, in some places, a sizable elevation-driven snow, in my never to be humble opinion.
I would agree. And elevation certainly is going to play a big key. I think it's a little early in the ball game to start speculating, although I do know one person who's already gotten his early snow map up.
Well, I'm going to speculate. Can I speculate?
You could do it anything you want.
So let's
To me, I
let's
don't get I don't get into speculation until 84 to 72 hours before.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I had a few people that that needed me to do an early speculation ask me for it. So
Nope.
I went ahead and said, you know what? Why don't I go ahead and do that? So let me just bring it up here for you. It's not any kind of specific. I kind of just sort of did a combination. I guess you can call it a combination of. Uh, Wait, let me get the right map up because that's not the one I want to show. Uh, is it this one? Yeah, this is the one. So sorry guys, you got a black screen there. Just bear with me. If you got a black screen, it's going to take a second here. I got to bring it back up. And there it is. Okay, so this is what I'm doing. And I kind of did a combination of, how WPC and their long range does the best chances for at least a quarter of an inch of liquid. And then I just sort of, and I looked at what what was going on and with what the models are showing. So I sort of melded that concept together into this map. And basically, where I have the black line, I actually thought that there's a chance that when the low goes by Saturday night and the upper low comes overhead, that there might be a change over to a mix or wet snow, especially in some elevated areas. So I drew the line, not too far from your house, along and north of Route 84, and then going into northwest New Jersey, where it's part of that band of a coating to maybe a couple of inches. I figured it was worth covering for those spots and then going north from there. And the rest of it is from whatever happens between Saturday and Saturday night, which might not be all snow all the time in some places. It's going to depend on how high up you are. So you see where I have my best chances for 4 inches or more. And then I've got that blue box in upstate New York. That would include Binghamton, maybe up I-81 all the way up to Syracuse, back to not quite to Rochester, in a zone of the best chances for 6. And then I have a zone of 4 or more in northernmost Connecticut in the Berkshires, and then extending on northward from there into southern Vermont and New Hampshire. I could have made that a 6 plus, but decided that for now there was no need to really go off the deep end, and I just went for best chances for 4 plus. And I can bring up WPC's map because they updated it today on their long range. So let's go to that.
Well, that's just percentile chance, correct?
Yeah, hold on one second. Yes, that's the percent chance of at least a quarter of an inch falling as snow or sleet. And I got it right here. I love this because if you move your mouse too fast, you will accidentally wind up switching maps. So actually, there's a 2-day component to this. So on Saturday, this is ending Saturday morning. So you see there's a 10% chance back into parts of western Pennsylvania of at least a couple. Come on, stop it now. So there's your 10% chance and a little 40% chance in the mountains of West Virginia. Again, elevation driven. And then from Saturday into Sunday morning, the 25, the 30% chance or higher of at least a quarter of an inch. Northern Pennsylvania, probably really mostly along north of I-80 in PA. And then it kind of cuts across the Catskills and then runs up the Hudson Valley. You see that finger that runs up east of the Hudson. So there's going to be lesser. I think there's going to be lesser snow there, and then it picks up again when you go further to the east into Vermont and Western Mass and down into New Hampshire. So I just sort of combined this with what I looked at some of the models. The European was I thought overly aggressive with their snow amounts in terms of what it's put its output. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but I just don't. I don't feel comfortable with what the European did at this stage, and I don't feel the model has really performed that well with whatever algorithms determine the snow amounts. But
No, it's just not.
that's my early call.
This has not been the Europeans' winter. That's for sure.
Well, at least not here, not in the Northeast anyway, and
Yeah,
certainly not in our neck of the woods.
right.
Um, so, all right, so let's take a look. Yes, it's pretty interesting on the loop, Joe, on the satellite loop tonight because there's a storm developing off the southeast coast, and you can see the clouds starting to rev up there, and that's going to go out straight to the east. That gets kicked out, so that allows our high that's overhead to gradually suppress to our south. So we got right in here. This is all high pressure, but that's going to go out to the east as this storm goes out to the east, and then you're starting to see the moisture pile up from New Mexico, Baja California, streaming northeastward into Texas and on up into the southern and central plains. And of course, that's going to be what's eventually going to produce the winter weather advisories. And then we've got, of course, all this moisture that continues to just kind of pile in to the western part of the United States from off the west coast. So it's fairly busy here. No cold air, though, as we said. If you look, you look around. This cold high is we're past the bottom now, so we're going to start to see our temperatures moderate the next couple of days. I think we'll probably we're going to get into the low and mid 40s. I think for Thursday and Friday.
Well, I think I had a high temperature for uh, let's say lower Westchester uh, for tomorrow. I've got low 40s there, and I think we're going to see temperatures on Thursday with enough sunshine take a run south of 287, take a run to the upper 40s to around 50.
You think it'll push that high?
I think it could.
All right.
And the
I was
winds
a
are
little. I was a
not going
little.
to be, but the winds are not going to be overly strong. I mean, it's going to be a light west wind, but it's still a west wind, a little bit downsloping. I don't know,
All
but
right. Well, we'll see. I kind of went a little bit lower. I just sort of tailed back to like middle 40s. Mostly middle 40s. I don't know. I'm just the upper air doesn't really warm all that much. With the high going out, it's so weak, and then you've got this next little push that's coming down from the north. Although that doesn't really bleed in here until late Friday night and Saturday. And you can see on the radar tonight, we've got the beginnings of precip running out of eastern New Mexico and into West Texas, on up into western Kansas, and of course the activity that's up in the northwest. But everybody in the eastern half of the United States is quiet, and you can actually see the radar picking up on some showers off the southeast coast, and that's with the coastal low that is developing just to the northeast of the Bahamas. That's going to be running out to the east northeast. It actually helps that low helps to set the table with regards to the next weather system that approacheth from the west. And here's your surface map tonight. The high in southern Illinois. That low off the Bahamas, Joe, is actually dragging down the colder air that's up in the Carolinas and back through Tennessee, where it's in the 30s and low 40s. That cold air streaming southward down into Florida. And as my friend John told me, who's down there right now, they're all in panic with temperatures tonight where he is in Florida getting down into the 30s, whereas he is going to be more than comfortable considering the kind of weather that we have up here.
yes, they are not used to that down there in Florida. Um, and I always tell people, I said, if you're planning a winter vacation, you do better to go somewhere in the Caribbean because there's always like 1 in 3 chance, even in South Florida, that you're going to end up with a few days where the temperatures are far below what you are, risking to pay out for. And this is going to be one of those cases, as you mentioned. I think even in Miami and down toward Key West, they're going for lows tonight in the mid and low 40s.
Wow.
So that's
Well, I
pretty.
told you when I was down in Savannah in early December, it was in the up. It had dropped down in the upper 40s to around 50. I saw people walking around with hats, gloves, and scarves on.
Right.
And I'm in shorts. It didn't bother me none. But the body does get used to certain weather conditions. When you're used to very warm weather all year long, the minute it goes under 60, you do feel it. And the same goes when you're in the other direction. When you're used to temperatures below zero and it pops up to 20 or 25, you feel warm. That's Listen. We would not otherwise we would not be able to survive.
Well,
Really.
man is the most adaptable creature on Earth, and we can, after a while, you just simply adapt to the new. I mean, look, we had temperatures in the 60s, what, just a little over a week ago, and now we find ourselves just barely able to tolerate temperatures at around 30. But give it another few more days, and we probably would tolerate it. But now temperatures are going to be bouncing back up here during the latter part of the week.
Okay, so I decided it'd be a good idea to pull up that FGen map tonight for this system for Saturday. And there's a couple of things I noticed. I know this is something that you pay attention to. First off, going into this on Saturday, now we it looks like there's actually some pretty good strong omega. I have the eight. Did I pull up the 850? I pulled up the 850 rather than the 700. But there is some what you would for you what the omega in Chesapeake Bay. That's probably, Joe, your secondary low that's starting to form
Okay.
in moving northeastward. That area actually moves right over New York City by early Saturday afternoon. And then it moves out. And then there's another area of omega that I noticed in eastern Pennsylvania, and this is Saturday night. The zero line, the freezing line at the 4,800 foot level, is, comes in at Atlantic City to the Jersey, Pennsylvania border and then swings eastward across northern Connecticut, northern Rhode Island. -3 is back up through from Albany westward and then comes down into east central PA. And there's another little omega area that's in that region. I think that this says that at least north and west, well north and west of the coast, that in some elevated areas that there's going to be a few pockets that are going to get hit. You know, I hate to, I don't want to necessarily use the word very hard, but I think there's the possibility that there could be some pockets of heavy wet snow in some of these elevated areas, judging by this what I'm seeing here with this temperature profile, and then by Sunday morning, 1 a.m. There's an 850. There's a low at 850 millibars that I can pick out from the wind field, sitting right over Long Island. And the hang on, let me just draw it in. So it looks like it's right about there. There's a little 850 low in here. And the zero line is actually collapsed out to Montauk, and -3 is almost into western New Jersey. Most times, it it doesn't, when you get situations like this, you don't see a changeover on the backside. I think it's possible that we could see a changeover right before the precip pulls out as cold air gets dragged down from the north late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. That's really about the only chance that there'll be for any kind of snowflake action along the coast. And even if it happens, I don't even know if it's going to amount to anything. Northwest New Jersey, Sullivan County, maybe Northwest Orange at the end. From you north, perhaps, you might get a little bit of a cheap thrill out of this. But other than that, I really don't see too much happening here.
Yeah, well, in north, excuse me, in northeastern Pennsylvania, in Wayne County, there is, for example, Mount Ararat. Believe it or not, Joe, wasn't Mount Ararat where they found Noah's Ark?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, there's a Mount Ararat in northeastern Pennsylvania, elevation 2,654 feet, and I'm looking at some of the thermodynamic, some of the temperature maps suggesting that temperatures might be just cold enough Saturday afternoon in that part of Pennsylvania for precipitation to come down as snow. So I'm thinking that by Saturday afternoon, you're going to have to be probably at least 2,000 or 2,500 feet above sea level by Saturday afternoon now to get any kind of significant sticking or accumulation. Anything
Right.
below that, probably it's just going to be wet, slushy flakes mixing with rain, or maybe just plain rain. So I wouldn't, I'm not going to get too uh, upset or emotionally into this right now on Tuesday, looking ahead to Saturday. My daughter is supposed to get a set of tires done. She lives up in the New Paltz area. She called up. She likes to look at the maps. I taught her how to, look at some of these maps on Tropical Tidbits. Thank you, Levi Cohen, for that. And she calls me up. She says, "What's going to happen on Saturday? I see snow." She's supposed to get tires because they're almost bald, actually.
Oh God.
and and now she says she's looking at possibility of snow. I said, don't get upset just yet. This looks like elevation snow. You're not up that high.
Right.
Don't worry about it. Don't. So we'll see. We'll
But
see how this all pans out. But it looks more like a map that you would see, I think, in late March or early April, as
yeah, I was
opposed
going to
to
say that,
yeah,
or maybe in late October, early November. By the
right.
way, the I just noticed with this low that's between the Bahamas and Bermuda, and with rain getting thrown back to the coast, that this is on the map tonight for 1 a.m. on the GFS. The 540 thickness is down almost to central Florida.
Lovely.
Okay. So actually, that precip that's just offshore, if it were just a little bit further to the west, they probably would be seeing some hail, some snowflakes, or some grapple, or maybe even some low top thunderstorms under certain circumstances. But if you're going to speculate, you might as well go whole hog. The low drops out, of course, then pulls away to the northeast, and you can see the system out to the west. Now there's a low that's going to be moving out of Texas. There is also a low that's going to be a reflection of the upper low that is coming down, and that's what you see back up into Iowa. And this low is going to wind up going to the northern lakes and the lower lakes, I'm sorry, and basically falling apart. And you're going to wind up with another low starting out probably in the mountains of North Carolina that's going to run up northeastward and track pretty much right up along the immediate coast. And again, there's just an absolute lack of cold air, even though there is a high that builds down into toward the St. Lawrence River, northwest of Maine. It's not a particularly strong one, and your cold air is just only going to be able to get your quote unquote cold air is only going to be able to get so far south, and it's not really Arctic air anyway. So you're going to see the models kind of produce this sort of blotchy snow with patches of rain inside of it. That this is a marker of an elevation driven snow. Same down on with the upper low, you're seeing some snows on the backside down in West Virginia and into Western Virginia and Western North Carolina. Again, that's because of the upper feature. And it's Sunday morning that maybe you get that little hook on the backside. The GFS is not showing it all that well, but maybe you could have a little bit of precip here that sort of hangs back on the west side of the low as the upper feature goes by. That really is the only way that you're going to wind up with anything. And then it moves on into Maine and Nova Scotia. You take the snow there. And then, Joe, it's just really kind of a wash, rinse, repeat. The next high, the air is not really all that cold, goes out off the southeast coast. Next low tries to head off to the lakes. Looks like we'll get into some rain here toward the end of next week, and that's it. There's nothing that finishes off the month of January.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Uh, a few days ago, I would have said that probably we wouldn't have a shot at any snow, at least through the early days of February. this, at least on Saturday, gives a few people a fighting chance of seeing some of the white stuff. But after that, yeah, I really don't see much of anything happening. Maybe right on through the first week of February. So we'll see.
And if you take a look at the upper air on the GFS, I got the whole hemispheric view. Again, you have to you go from a pattern that was terrible to a different pattern that's terrible in a different way. Of course, it's wonderful. We've got this active, southern jets part of the jet stream that's shooting these Pacific systems across. But the problem is all up here. You see all of this, and I'm circling up from an upper low vortex, one vortex sitting over Alaska, another vortex sitting between Iceland and Greenland. All the cold air locked up there. And then you got this flow in Canada that every once in a while spills a little bit of cold air down into the Northeast. And that's it. And then it pulls out. And then here comes the next one with the system to the west. And then here we are, February 2nd and 3rd. And, I mean, it just does not look good, Mr. Rayo. It just doesn't. And of course, once again, toward the end of the run, glimmers of hope, upper high building toward Greenland, the vortex complex across the north, across the polar regions is broken down. So we have a colder look that develops and maybe some cross polar flow. But as always, it shows up at day 16. And as always, as on the earlier run today, we saw the obligatory snow at 384 hours, which never happens. So, look, I think at this stage, you really you're going to have to really prove it to me in terms of having an important weather pattern change of any kind happening in the next couple of weeks to get us away from what we have. You got to get a connection to that cold air that's locked up in the Arctic region. If you don't get it, you got a problem. Then you're dealing with minimal amounts of cold air that come down. It's not a true blowtorch, warm pattern, really. But who cares? I mean, if it's going to, if you're going to be above normal, you might as well be well above normal so that we could really go out there in short sleeves and enjoy it.
Well, I
That,
know the last few years, whenever we got around to Super Bowl time, there was always something that was developing, so to speak, for snow lovers. And need I remind everybody about what was it, about 5 or 6 years ago already, that we had the Super Bowl at MetLife Stadium, and
right.
like 6 or 8 hours after the game ended, we had what, a snowstorm here.
Yes, we
It,
did.
it always seems in recent years that we have some kind of winter weather event occurring around or just after the Super Bowl. But this year, at least from our vantage point right now, the Super Bowl is still a couple of weeks away. It doesn't look like that's going to happen.
The one thing I saw, the one thing that I thought was a little strange, and I'm going to bring this up, is the icon model today. For some reason, there's a distinct difference in the icon model out at 180 hours, and of course, this will be proven or disproven in short order. But one of the things that it does that the other models are not doing, we've got this storm that is developing off the southeast coast, and this was something that the GFS did not show back days ago. The icon model was very good at picking up on this developing low, unlike the other models, which were having a really tough time with it. The one way that it is a little bit different is after this storm goes by, it actually forms a very powerful gale center east of the Carolinas Monday night, later Monday into Tuesday. And, it sort of alters the profile of the surface and upper air a little bit because it's got a high up north of Superior and it's got the 540 thickness by Tuesday afternoon, dragged all the way down into almost to South Carolina. And it just, to me, Joe, it has a bit of a different look at 500 as well because it's got this storm out east of, offshore that the other models don't have. So I thought that was a little intriguing that it did this. The question is it real or not? Because if it is real, that might alter the plans of this next storm, this next shortwave later next week that's down from Kansas into Texas from lifting up toward the Great Lakes. It may wind up getting more squash to the south because of the what's going on here in the Northeast and back through the Great Lakes. You've got this northwest flow. Your gale center is out here. That's going to keep the jet stream more suppressed and further south. That might force this to go more to the east rather than lift to the north. In the icons world, it's the only model that's doing this. So I just happened to notice that today.
But that's the icon.
Right.
Now you have to hope that the Canadian and the European and ultimately the GFS jump on board as well. Otherwise, the icon is going to be the outlier, so to
Right.
speak.
It's going to be DEF CON. By the way, speaking of the Canadian model, a long-awaited upgrade of the Canadian model was done today, apparently. So let's see how it impacts its performance with regards to spinning up. It hasn't been that bad. Well, it has actually. Spinning up snowstorms that don't happen with ideal tracks. In the summertime, it's always been very poor with tropical systems. It loves to, spin up Category 5 hurricanes almost at will. You know, every little every little disturbance that's out there becomes a Category 5 hurricane at some point. So maybe the upgrade is going to correct some of those problems that we have with the Canadian model.
They'll come out with a parallel Canadian model.
Oh yes. Let's try a perpendicular one.
Yes,
All right, so we're back on the full screen, folks. So both of us are up on camera now. So if you've got any questions that you put up there before, roll it on with the chat and put it on the chat, and we'll see if we can answer it. In the meantime, you can. It's time for you to roll the Jeopardy question, the Jeopardy answer to me,
that's right. Scott Briller
courtesy of
gave me
Scott Briller. Yes.
yes, he gave me a question to fire over at you. And here is the question. The final meteorological Jeopardy answer is: we
Go
have
on.
done this at Central Park since 1869. How many times have we hit, or how many times has Central Park reached 60 inches or more of snow in a given winter since 1869?
Okay, I'm gonna say.
Am I? Is there going to be a copyright issue if I
I,
do it this way
I
with
don't
the
know.
time?
I'll take a guess. I was either gonna say 6 or 8 times, so I'll say 6.
Well, I'm sorry. Let's see. First you put 6, then you cross that out and you put 8, but the final answer was 10.
Oh,
We
I was
have
gonna. That
10.
was another possibility. I was gonna say an even 10.
So
Yeah, I
let's see
listen.
what he
Listen.
wagered.
If that question were worded for Long Island, you would only have to go back to the year 2000, and you could have said is it? I think it's at least 6. And in
But
fact, you could have even worded a question for how many times has it gone above 70, and you would have come up with I believe the answer is 3. So uh, I live in a different world out here.
it would have been a lot more fun if we had like the old Jeopardy where they would write the amount that they wagered and then Art Fleming would come along and he'd flip. Remember that? He'd flip the
Yes.
screen or whatever.
No, sorry. Um, let's see. We've got a new person on board here. 1/JG26JDog wants to know if the storm could shift south this weekend as far as snow goes. No, I don't think it will. I think it's going to track pretty close to how the models have it, which is, right along the Jersey, Long Island shoreline. And, what you have to hope for is that upper low, if it's a little further south, and you could get a little bit of backside, as cold air get swept in on the backside. But even if that happens, I think that's probably just at this point. I just don't see anything. If we had a solid Arctic air mass coming down on the backside of this, then I think you could make a case for maybe some pretty good backside snows for somebody. But you don't have it here, so I just don't see it. The absence of Arctic air is that's a big deal.
Maybe Joe, with this system coming in on the weekend, we'll see places, let's say above a couple of thousand feet, get snow, and then on the backside, maybe the air will be dynamically cooled enough so that we can actually lower the level down to maybe 1,500 or 1,000 feet
Yeah,
for
that's possible.
for Saturday night, Sunday morning.
That's possible. Yeah, I mean, if you've got elevation here, especially when you go up toward the Catskills, obviously, and points north, you might do. There are going to be some spots I think that are going to do fairly well from this. But it's only Tuesday, so expect the forecast to get modified quite a bit, especially from what I put up earlier. I mean, that was just sort of a general view
Right.
of what I think could happen. I mean, if you want to talk about, if we're going to start drawing lines of say 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, or 8 plus. We'll wait till Thursday or Friday for that. That was just sort of an early view of what happened. And by the way, Joe, you know what pretty well. With these sorts of instances, when you've got these elevation-driven storms that are being caused by these upper lows, sometimes these upper lows can go bananas in certain spots under certain conditions. And I think
Right.
you always have to allow for that possibility. But again, that also I believe is a short-term forecast issue. You're not going to guess. You're not going to know today whether that's going to happen whether that's going to happen or not.
Or as Alan Casper mentioned with the last system over the weekend, especially with this area of energy or Omega moving on by, who's to say there may be some little convective ripples?
Well,
You know,
you certainly got those little Omega fields showing up on the FGen map, but right into Sunday morning, in fact. MMWD, the Canadian model upgraded. I believe it was the global, the GEM. I don't know if they did the GDPS. I did read something that said that the GEM. Jack Packlian, I hope I got that correct. Welcome aboard. Joe, is it good? Which Joe? Is it a good rule of thumb to go by if the pattern is consistent this far into winter that it pretty much stays like that the rest of the way? Mr. Rayo, you want to address that?
well, we take for example the European. I remember back in the back about 8 or 9 years ago, it was horrible for the first a month or so as we went into the winter season. It got so bad, in fact, that it kept promoting possible big snowstorms 4, 5, 6 days out, and then when we finally got to the event, it pretty much was off the table or shriveled up. And I said after a while, I said, I'll believe it when I see it. This has not been a great year or great winter so far for the European, and if you see something enough times, you're probably going to say, we'll wait until we get a little bit closer, and that's you know you just said before about the European, kind of trying to promote some significant snow on this for this weekend. Let's wait and see. We're still like 4 or 5 days out.
Um, I think what he was getting at though was the primary weather pattern sets up in a winter in a certain way, and even though you have these moments, these periods where it breaks down, there's sort of a primary pattern that's in play. Some years what happens is you get into a pattern that starts out somewhere around mid-December, carries you into mid-January. It lasts about 4 weeks or so. Then you get that quote January thaw, and then the pattern comes back the same way it was in the first half. You get that sort of setup in in many, but not all winters. Sometimes you get winters where it's all in the first half, and then it just flips completely to something totally different in the second half, and then you have some years. An example of the a good example of the flip in reverse is the El Nino year of 1516, because you had it very warm at the beginning and moderately warm at the end. But when we flipped for about 2 weeks, that's when we had the blizzard of 16. So the primary pattern of the El Nino was interrupted for that brief 2 week period, and it wound up producing a record blizzard for many areas in the northern Mid-Atlantic to southern New England, and then it went back to something of what it was. Here's Adam Lowe, who brings this point up. Too many meteorologists rely too much on the models now. What happened to old-fashioned forecasting skills, forecasting on trends and patterns? Well, Mr. Rayo, yeah,
Oh,
what? Yeah, well, I think that's what we do.
but
I
I
mean,
think
I'm saying when I say what we do is I think we rely on trends and patterns, and yes, we look at modeling, but we don't let that be the primary driver for what we're talking about in terms of a final forecast.
yeah, but it's so much different. I don't know about you, Joe, but like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I would used to, along with my cohort, at the company where I used to work, Pete Bergman, we used to plot up sectionals. In other words, we used to actually physically take observations from off the teleprinter and we'd sit down and we would plot it ourselves. And as you do that, I don't
As I
know,
did that too. Yeah, go on. I'm
you
sorry.
get into a mental state of mind, like you get an idea, kind of a feel of what's happening out there. Better, I think, than if you look at a map now and you say, oh, look at that. It's I don't know, it's just different than the way it used to be for us. We if you think about it, when we first started, I mean, our methodology or some of our methodology was no different than what the forecasters in the 50s and 40s, 50s, and 60s were doing. But now all of a sudden we flipped into this dynamic mode of looking at things, relying heavily on the internet, social media, all of these computer models or whatever. And like I said the other night, when somebody was talking about, plotting up soundings or whatever like that, I can't even remember the last time I plotted a sounding. I guess I could go back to college.
Yeah.
So many things have changed for us over the last, 20, 30, 40 years. And there's a rely. But I will also say this: if you work as much as we have with the models, after a while, you tend to see mentally, and you could look at something and say, well, I don't believe that. I think
Right.
that's a little bit too far south, in my opinion. And you look at other models, you could do it that way, but it's different now as opposed to way back when.
Justin King, I think you have a chance to do pretty well in southwestern Maine with this. If as long as it doesn't get too tucked in inland, if it stays just offshore, you probably will have a decent amount. I mean, just enough cold air. Of course, you're up in Maine, so I mean, it's hard to imagine. In Maine, the rain snow line is probably a welcomed forecast challenge because it doesn't really get up there too often. But I think you could wind up doing fairly well, and I'm gonna I'll expand my snow maps tomorrow to kind of look at things going on up there. Oh, Gloria Rangod is on. Hello, Gloria. She's one of our biggest fans, by the way, Joe. Just so you know. Oh,
Okay.
where'd she go? I just saw it. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just about to. This is what I love about the YouTube screen, Joe, that I use when I live stream, and I'm seeing the chat go.
Here's Gloria.
Yeah, can you read
Gloria
what she has?
Rangot
Because I
says,
can't find her.
I love that we're not having big snow and sincerely hope that it stays this way. A repeat of last winter for Brentwood and now Islip.
Yes. Well, look, let's be clear. There are people, there are folks that are on the other side of the trade here that don't necessarily like to see snow in the wintertime. They like things to be calm and quiet and reasonable and not have to deal with snow and ice. And I get that, and I certainly get that. So we certainly want to give them. I always try to make sure I kind of balance it a bit. I think both of us try to do that in terms of balancing. But yeah, this. And by the way, uh, let me address something that I saw yesterday. There's two things I want to acknowledge. Mark Gladfelter hitting super chat tonight. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it as always. Garo Vesas, I put the map up earlier. With regards to the Catskills, I have them in a zone of maybe 4 to 6. I'm sorry, a zone of a fair chance of at least 4. That's about as much as I'm going to go out on a limb 4 to 5 days out. All right, so we'll just have to wait till late in the week with regards to that.
Chuck,
Um,
Card- Chuck Cardillo says, Joe, years ago, I remember Gordon Barnes used to talk about a 90-day weather cycle. Any truth to that? Gordon Barnes used to, on WCBS News Radio 88, he used to come on like at the beginning of the month and give the news anchors a list of dates that he believed we were going to get hit with a significant snowfall. And actually, he's from the Harry Geiss School of Long Range Meteorology. For about a year back in 1965, I believe, or 66, on Channel 2 here in New York, they had a fellow by the name of Harry Geiss, who is now who is legendary. He passed away a few years ago, but he moved to the West Coast, became a legend out there for making really long range forecasts, Joe. And apparently, this is according to uh, Jim Witt, who is still around and is up in the Hudson Valley, that he watched Harry Geiss back in October of 66 predict a big snowstorm for Christmas Eve 1966, and it came true. And Jim Witt was so interested in this that he actually visited Harry Geiss, and Harry Geiss apparently gave Jim Witt all of his secrets because Jim was at the time teaching weather to high schoolers. I think at Lakewood School here in Westchester, and according to Jim, one guy who kept knocking at Harry Geis's door to find out all these things of the secret was Gordon Barnes. And according to Jim Witt, Harry Geis didn't give Gordon Barnes anything. Gordon Barnes had to look it up himself in the Compendium of Meteorology. I'm not sure whether or not there is anything to this, using the sun, using the motions of the moon or the planets to forecast the weather long range. And I think we touched upon this about a half a year ago. Jim Witt actually puts out a calendar, and he predicts times to watch for particular weather problems. He's got a list going all the way out to the end of this decade, believe it or not.
Right.
Um,
Well,
whether or not there's anything to that, but Gordon Barnes is funny. In fact, an old friend of yours, Willard Scott, once on the Larry King show, Willard Scott was a guest. Somebody brought up Gordon Barnes's name, and Willard Scott said, and this is a direct quote: "Ah, yes, Gordon Barnes. He could tell you what the weather's going to be like for 6 years from now, but he has trouble telling you what the weather's going to be like in 48 hours."
yeah, and that's kind of been. I know. You know what? I said this many times. If you're a trader, if you're a farmer, that kind of information is valuable to you. If you're the average everyday person, I don't understand. I know when people ask because it's part of conversation, but there's no practical use to knowing whether the summer is going to be hot. You're not making monetary decisions and job decisions. If you are, that's a different story. But if you're not, I don't see much use. Nor from the standpoint, if you're a a weather enthusiast, why do you really want to know what the weather's going to be like 6 months from now? Let it happen. 90% of the fun is watching it evolve,
Right.
and then the last 10% is when it's actually going on. Johnny Quest, storms to come out of the Gulf. Well, this low for this weekend, actually, the southern part of it's going to originate down in the Gulf states. We do have an active southern jet, which will promote lows from to move across. Now, the jet may need to be further south in order to get lows to truly form in the western Gulf, for example, or somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. But it's not quite far enough south, at least not yet. Maybe it does get there eventually, but at least for the time being, it's not. Justin King hit super chat. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate that very much, as always. The other thing I want to just go back, Joe, to that question regarding, forecasters, TV, forecasters today in TV, over reliance on models. I would just I want to point this out. I think you're going to be on the same page with me. Once upon a time, when you worked in television, you went in, you did one show, or maybe you did two shows, one in the late afternoon, a 6 o'clock news or a 5 o'clock news or whatever it was, and then you did something at 11 o'clock. You maybe did a couple of weathers in each show, and that was pretty much it. Okay, so you really had the time to go and really delve into what was going on. Nowadays, when many of these TV stations, weather people are doing hits every 10 minutes for hours on end, especially in the morning. They work a quote 8-hour day. They can't do it alone in terms of building graphics. So if they are alone, and in most television stations they really don't have time. They just come in, and it's basically, from a standpoint of time, it's just easier to sort of take a partially pre-produced show graphic wise, and you don't spend as much time with the forecast because you don't have the time to spend. And so it becomes, okay, this model's doing this, the weather service has this forecast, we'll kind of mesh it in there like that, and just go forward. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. These weather people on TV now are, I would say, decidedly overworked. Okay, I mean, really overworked, that they can't spend the necessary time to get into the specifics of what's going on. Which I mean, I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're right. There was a lot of time in between shows, and I remember over at where I used to work at News 12, we used to have just a 5 o'clock and a 10 o'clock show. Then all of a sudden they decided to add a 7 o'clock show, and then we had another show at 6. And then it's and you say, where's the break time? When do I get a chance to settle in and you know, get my head into the pattern here. And you're right. It's and especially in the morning.
Oh
Some
God, in the morning it's murder.
It's crazy. you have to do it. You have to be on guard every 10 minutes, and you really don't have time unless you come in. I worked with with somebody at News 12, Bryson Van Eck, and Bryson used to tell me that there just simply wasn't time to do a detailed bunch of maps. He said unless I decided to come in at 1 o'clock in the morning or like 3 hours ahead of time to get all this stuff together. It's crazy, but this is the world we live in, Joe. Instant gratification. You want the weather? We'll give it to you every 8 minutes right here on.
Yeah,
And
and it's nuts. And
it's not
and
very.
actually, I'm quite happy the way things are. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm I'm truly enjoying this. If only I could have been born uh, 20 or 30 years later than I was. This is sort of an ideal setup for me. Uh, you fantasize when you were a kid about one day having your own channel in a world where the concept didn't even exist, and now here we are broadcasting on my YouTube channel every night, doing what I want to do when I want to do it, and talk about weather and it's I think it's a wonderful thing what we're doing because we can spend the time. Who else does an hour, at least an hour show every night, and all we do is talk weather and models. And not only that, but we've got a decent sized audience to boot. Daniel Fitzsimmons, how many weather and model sites are there on the internet?
Oh
Oh
well,
God, that's that. There's so many. I mean, I couldn't tell you what the specific number is. I have no idea.
you could look at let's say the GFS on 4 or 5 different sites, and the way it appears on each site is a little bit different than the other sites. And you say, oh, I like it the way it's depicted here. For example, we used to look at the NCEP site religiously. Now I
Yeah,
hardly look at it at all because Tropical Tidbits has taken over with its
right. And
with,
then you
with
got pivotal weather, especially because
and pivotal weather.
you can see the high resolution European with all the different levels in the precip and the snow maps, and that does help. Um, yeah, I mean, there's quite a few other ones, some smaller ones that have far less data on them, but tropical tidbits. Uh, to me is just it's very well done. I mean, the pivotal graphics are great too. Um, but I guess I just got used to tropical tidbits. Jeffrey Mara says I seemed a little less stressed since retiring from TV.
Do you?
I'll say,
By the way, Joe, you see this beat up envelope here,
yeah,
right? Can you see what this says?
Mid Atlantic blizzard of '79.
Do you know what's in here? I kept all the teletype information. I've got the old LFM maps in here. I mean, it's crazy. It's like going back in time. This is all the stuff all the stuff. This is from the President's Day storm of 1979, and I keep stuff like this just as a memory to go back to the days.
I
Okay,
have a memory of peering through my blinds at 7 o'clock the next morning and just seeing a wall of white. I happened to catch the last few hours. I know it was all S plus S plus S plus S plus. Snow increased 5 inches an hour.
but you know
Uh,
what? You can't get this
no,
anymore.
you
I
can't.
mean, now you don't get the teleprinter information where you can get a whole block of
Right,
information.
but look, bear this in mind, Joe. That's because that's the technology that we grew up with.
Right.
Okay, the folks that are growing up with this now, when they get to be our age, um, uh, many years from now, when they get to be our age, they're going to be looking at what we're doing now, and they're going to be saying, "This is," and doing the same thing you did. This is how we did things. Yes, But you see, one of the things, but that was the forecast. Wasn't that the night before that quarter of an inch of liquid only up to Maryland?
Right, correct.
That was one of the bigger busts that had ever occurred.
But there's the snow line, Joe. The snow line was
Yeah.
down near the North Carolina South Carolina border.
Oh, it was crazy that day.
Oh,
With all the moderate snows down in southern Virginia, North Carolina, and we wound up with 20 inches plus in some areas up here. It was just nuts. Um,
but you need to, you know what, Joe? Jerry Lewis, the late great Jerry Lewis, used to say one of the things that bothered him is that young comedians who are coming out now, they almost immediately are thrown out in front of a huge television audience. And he says these young comedians don't have a chance to be bad. And what he was saying was
he's right.
that
He's right. He's absolutely right. They don't have a chance to be bad.
you need to fall on your face a few times before you get a chance to go on the big stage. I fell on my face, and so did you and everybody else
We
with
all
that
have.
79. And then a few months later, I fell on my face again. There was a July 4th where I promised everybody it was going to be a spectacularly beautiful July 4th. You may remember that, July 4th, 1979. It drizzled in the
Yes.
afternoon.
Yeah.
The day before, I said it was going to be beautiful. Again, another thing. But you know what? You need these things to happen because in 83, with that megalopolitan storm, which dumped a foot to 2 feet from Washington to Boston, the morning of that event, the models were saying that the storm was going to take a further track to the east and south of our area, and the amount of snow was halved. And a lot of forecasters that day believed it. And I said, and this is the absolute truth, on many radio stations, I'm not going to go with this. I'm going to go with what we've been saying for the last few days and go for a major storm. I got into big trouble, or was almost in big trouble, with the sanitation department in New York. Walter Hines, who is the deputy superintendent of the New York City Sanitation Department. These are the guys who have to plow the roads and plow the streets. The National Weather Service knocked the accumulations down based upon that one computer run that morning of the
Yeah.
storm. I refused to do that. And in those days, I don't know what the rule is now. The sanitation department had the National Weather Service and a private forecasting service. If both are on the same page, good. Then we proceed. He was asking me, Walter Hines, that Friday morning, can I send some of my men home? It doesn't look like the storm is going to be as bad based upon what I just saw from the National Weather Service. And I said, Mr. Hines, it's snowing to beat the band in Philadelphia. It's snowing like crazy in Tom's River. That's a little too close for me to say that we're going to blow this and miss out. And could we wait another few hours for the new run of the computer? Well, I don't. Because now that I was saying this, it was the equivalent of a hung jury.
Right.
His hands were tied. He couldn't do anything. So long as one forecasting outlet said one thing and the other said another thing, he couldn't change anything. He could have, but if he was wrong on that decision, but 3 hours later, the beloved LFM changed its mind again.
Yes.
And in came the big snows. And I was quoted late that night on various news outlets and everything else. And in Miami, Florida, he sent me. I don't know if you could see it. It's right there from the Miami Herald. That was sent to me by the Commissioner Hines. I was quoted as the loquacious Joe Rayo because loquacious Joe kept giving all these statistics. Well, we've just passed the storm of 63, 15 inches on the ground, etc. Blah, 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 blah. And it was amazing. And he said, "You saved my neck." Mr. Hines has long since gone to his reward, but again, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't fallen on my face a few times.
Sure.
Like with this storm,
you have to cut your teeth.
Yes.
You have to cut your teeth, and you have to do it in a certain way, and that includes busting forecast. That's how you learn. And right. I just don't think. Yeah, you're right. The kids today don't really get that opportunity. Tim Taguska, nice to have you on board, but I don't do Lloyd Lindsay Young type shout outs. But I will say hello to Seacliff. Hello, Seacliff. Okay, but not in. Lloyd's got his own style, and that's his thing, and not mine.
He's out in Sacramento, California now, I believe.
Yes. Justin King, thanks for noticing the fact that my goatee has really gotten to the level of serial killer. I really appreciate it. But it's grown in quite nicely.
What do you mean, Justin King? I remind you so much of your grandfather.
Where does he say that?
He says it. Justin King, Rayo reminds me so much of my grandfather. Ha 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 ha.
Oh, you do that? You remind him, right? You remind him of his grandfather, or I remind him of his grandfather?
No, Rayo. Rayo reminds
Oh,
me.
okay. Because I'm a grandfather already, so to me that's the highest compliment.
Ah,
It's
Rayo's nice.
okay to get old, Joe. We all get old. Oh,
Yeah,
older. It's just part
that's
of the.
true.
It's part of the process.
It
First you change. First you reach apex, then you change over to rain, okay, and then when you get to our point of life, we're starting to go over to drizzle and fog.
yes, exactly.
So that's just the way it works. By the way, Gary Vestas, I know you said, I don't know who you're quoting about 14 inches in the Catskills, but just to be clear, I'm not forecasting right now 14 inches in the Catskills. Okay. I am forecasting that there will be some snow up there, and I am forecasting the possibility that there could be 4 or more in the Catskills. But that's all I'm going to say at this point on a Tuesday for something that's going to happen later Saturday and Saturday night. So let's just be excuse me, let's just be clear. And okay, let's see. We have a Len says in Northwest Washington State right now, and there's a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado located near Aberdeen, moving northeast at 40 miles an hour. I don't. Is that close to Seattle? I have no idea. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. This has been weird this winter to seeing all these convective things going on
Right,
with squalls here. It's funny you get those on. Some years you get that. Every year's got something weird happens repeatedly, and this year it seems to be that we've been getting these little convective events with snow squalls and what happened on Saturday. By the way, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen before. This kind of stuff probably happened all the time. It's just that, it's only in the last 15 or 20 years that we have the density, or even less than that, that we have the density of observations and the sophistications of the radars that we have now to be able to see this sort of stuff.
right.
Pre-Doppler, you just had to guess, and that was tough,
But it
right?
was fun.
But it was fun.
By the way, Joe, I'm going to be on at noontime on Thursday. I'm going back to the beginning. The very first weathercast I ever did on radio when I broke into this business way back when, 1978, in case you're wondering. I was on WVOX, Vox Populi, the voice of Westchester, the biggest and most notable community radio station probably in the country. I made my debut there, and on Thursday at noontime, I'm going to appear with host Phil Reisman for an hour, talking about a feature that's going to be coming out in February in Westchester Magazine, and also talking about my career, my forced retirement, and maybe even touching upon such things as why somebody like myself or somebody like you, Joe,
Yeah.
with all of this experience and all of this knowledge, and I would have to say without any modesty, I think the two of us probably know about as much and are about as accurate as most anyone in the tri-state New York metropolitan area. And why we were suddenly sidelined, and nobody is looking at us, but they are looking at, as we just mentioned a few minutes ago, the young kids coming out of college. I guess
Uh,
these broadcast outlets just want to see them fall on their face a few times before you know putting.
Diego Brace, high back. Okay, if that's going to get you to stop putting things up 5 and 6 times, I'm saying hello. Okay, so I hope that makes you happy. All right, if you
Hi,
got
Diego. Hi,
and
Diego.
okay, so Joe
Hi,
says hi
Diego.
too. Um, okay, so if you're going to be on here, we got to behave as adults, and everybody has. Um, all right, there's obviously a problem here. He keeps saying hi, so we get that. Um, so look, just like I said, everybody behave as adults. If you got a question, put it up there. Right? You can converse amongst yourselves, and that's perfectly fine. But you know what? Yeah, maybe you're right, Howard. Maybe Diego's a bot. Who knows? Because it keeps saying hi. Hey, Johnny Quest, lose him. Okay, just get rid of him. This is really ridiculous. It's probably a bot. Get rid of him. Um, Justin King, I will take care of you. Okay, I promise. And one of these days, by the way, Justin, you got to get me some deer sausage. Okay, all right. I would appreciate it. Yeah, Joe. Going back to what you were saying, I have to, every day that goes by, and with what I've been reading about a few friends of mine and some of the things that they've been going through at certain stations, without getting too specific, I really, I just don't want any part of it anymore. I just don't. Uh, I was very lucky that I was able to get back to it after, after originally being let go from Channel 11 back in 2007, and it was for something. I mean, it was nothing I ever did. It was just an out of control, out of her mind general manager who woke up one morning and decided she hated me, which is something that she had decided for other people that she hated, and she got rid of people one by one, and she hated me, and she orchestrated a really deceitful way to get me out that involved another person with regards to switching shifts. That switching shifts, that's tough to say. That turned out, was a lie, and I lost my job. And it was a job that I really loved. I loved working there. And then I went back and worked there because I really enjoyed it so much, and I stayed out of the fray. But I've never forgotten um, what was done because of the fact that it came totally undeserved. I'm venting now, and I can feel my cheeks starting to turn red. It's one thing when you do something wrong in the workplace and you get in trouble for it. I get that, but I spent my entire career going to work when asked, when it was inconvenient, when I was sick, okay? Because I remember distinctly having to go to work before one of the President's Day blizzards back in 2003, maybe it was,
Okay.
2003. And I had the flu. I had 103 fever, okay? And they would not ask a certain weekday person to come in and work for me because we just don't want to call him up on a Sunday and ask him. And I had to go in. I went in with my fever, sick as a dog, did my job, went home. And there were a number of times where I was asked, you know, out of total inconvenience to me to work. And I always did the right thing. I did the right thing to help, the company, the team, and everything else. And you know what? At the end of the day, I got shafted. Okay, I could use a more descriptive. I could be more descriptive in what I mean by getting shafted, but I won't. I'll leave it to everybody else's imagination. But um, I have complete disrespect and disregard for most management people now in the television industry. I have no use for them whatsoever. Uh, and if you're watching, I could care less. I really could care less what you think of me. So there. So that if that knocks me out of any possibility of you hiring me, that's fine. So be it. Boy, that was a good rant. That's been kind of sitting in me for a long time. One of these days somebody's going to set me off, and I'm going to really be specific and name names and set a few people on fire. But I just, Joe, I especially in terms of what we just went through. Okay, that was so. That really kind of cinched it for me. I don't want to work for anyone anymore. You all suck. You just do. I look. You got me at a very. I suddenly am like feeling very open about my about how I feel because I got my
Well,
own show.
I'll just say this. I was offered the opportunity in October of this year by somebody in the New York market for possibly filling in during the winter holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and really got my hopes up because it would give me a chance to be seen in the immediate New York market. Of course, I've been in at News 12 for a good number of decades, actually, but to be seen on a broadcast outlet in New York City, that was something I would have liked to have hung my hat on for the end of my career. And then I found out that it was decided that rather than call me, who has been in this area for 40 plus years and knows just about all of the things about the quirky weather that we could have at any given time, instead of calling on me, they said, well, we're going to have people, they're going to bring in people from our affiliates, the affiliated stations
Right.
that are going to fill in. And in the span of Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, I sat at home and watched this particular channel. And they said, we'd like to bring in so and so. He's from our affiliate station in North Carolina. Or we'd like to bring this young man in. He's kicking off his career for the first time here at this station, and we're good to have. These are people who are 20, 30 years younger than I am. And in the case
Right.
of Carolina, are you telling me that the station actually invested in giving this guy a plane ticket, flying him up to New York from North Carolina, putting him in a hotel for a couple of days just so that he could make an appearance on the big station here in New York on a Saturday and Sunday and then fly him back? They'd rather
No.
have done that than simply call me up on the phone and say, hey, we'd love to have you come down and do what you do,
Yeah.
what you've done for all these years. No, they'd rather do that.
I
And
I I I think
that's the annoying thing to me, Joe.
right. Well, look, and you and I had this conversation beforehand, and it boils down to four words. Don't waste my time. If your intention is to go ahead and do something that doesn't include hiring me, tell me from the get go so I don't waste my time. That drove me crazy. Why are you creating this farce to let me believe that I might be in the running for a job when clearly you, as management, have already made up your mind?
Right.
That's the thing that used to drive me crazy. Look, I don't begrudge anybody else for as far as work is concerned. Because they're sitting in the same position that you and I are sitting in, looking for a job, trying to earn a living, and I understand that. So if I lose out on a job to someone that I know is better than I am as far as communicative skills, which at the end of the day, it's television. You got to be able to communicate. Okay, if so, that's number one. If their weather skills are equal to or better than mine, I'll be the first person to come up and say, you know what, you deserve to you deserve to have that job. But please don't insult my intelligence and don't waste my time by uh, making me feel like I'm in consideration for a job, and then you go hire someone that and I know completely inept, cannot complete sentences, okay, cannot speak in complete sentences. As far as their weather knowledge is concerned, it's something less than zero. And tell me that that person is better than what you could have gotten from me. That's the thing that for years got me, and that's why I'm at the point. I'm far at. Nobody's going to call me. No one is. So I really don't care, and I really don't care what anyone thinks of me with regards to with TV. Getting me back on television. It just doesn't mean anything to me anymore. And besides, they're putting up tolls in New York City if you drive in Manhattan. So you know what? If you want to hire me to go work in a New York City station with my level of experience, you better pay me. You better pay me a day rate that has a comma in the number, okay? Because if it doesn't have a comma in the number, I ain't coming.
Are you through?
Yeah, I'm through. I'm sorry. I'm on a roll now.
Yeah, somebody would say to me, he says, but Joe, you just said that you started at this station in Westchester, WVOX, and you were probably in your early 20s. I was 22 years old. He said, so why are you all upset about somebody who is on this big television station as opposed to you? My answer to that would be, yeah, but when I started at WVOX, I wasn't vying with Dr. Frank Field for that position. Obviously, if it were Frank Field or me, I'm sure they would have chosen Frank Field. Here I am vying for a position on television with somebody who might be right out of college or somebody who's not even in this area and familiar with the quirks of our weather, and yet they choose that person as opposed to somebody like myself.
Yeah.
All right, that's my rant. And
Yeah,
that's over and
the
done.
industry is the industry. Just there was a glory period. I think you and I both started at around the time that that's sort of in its glory period, or the glory period was coming to an end. I think from the time we started, among other things, we've watched salaries decrease over time. There's been a commoditization of talent as far as television is concerned. There's just too many people. Excuse me. There are too many people wanting to be on the air, and there are slots that are available. But there's too many people that want to be on the air, and they want to. One of the things for some reason, some people think that um, some people think that I want to work on TV news, so I'll do weather because it's easy. Okay, and yeah, they'll find out otherwise. Um, that's that's another something else that sticks in my craw with regards to that. Um, but like I said, the industry is what it is. It's a sad place. It's not a place I want to be part of, especially in this, you know, uh, bureaucratic, regulation-driven world that the corporate world has become. It's a much safer place to be on your own, in my opinion.
You know what's amazing, Joe?
Yes.
For the last half hour, we have been talking. Now it's 8:20.
Yes.
But at least for the last half hour, our viewership has been sitting at 107. It has not moved.
Oh no, I'm at 135 on my board.
It says 107 watching now. Started streaming 5 minutes ago. What does that mean?
Yeah, you might be stuck on an early number. I'm at 136. I have the real time. I have the streaming board up that you don't have, so I can
Okay.
see. I got all the technicals
Oh,
going
I
on.
thought
So
we had the same 107 people standing by us for the last half hour.
no, we might have the same 136 people that are sitting by us right now. So
Okay.
yeah, I think we've run this rant its course. So when it shows up on clips tomorrow across social media, we'll know why.
Well, I had just a few rants. You had for you it was Rantorama. We're going to bring
Yeah,
some. We're going
no,
to
it
be Sunny.
was.
We're going to bring Sunny Fox on now,
Yeah.
and the two of us will be waving just like they used to on Wonderama, right?
So this morning, by the way, on Perry Mason, it was the case of the floating stones. It involved. I couldn't watch it. I had the TV on, but I was distracted because I was on the phone and doing a few things. So I occasionally would look up just to make sure that everything was okay with Della.
Okay.
But that being said, it was something to do with there was a ship and there were diamonds and they were on stones and somebody got murdered by being stabbed, in the back in one of the stow rooms and the stowaway rooms, and the body just fell. But I didn't get the crux of the what the whole thing was about, and I don't know what tonight's episode is. That's
Well,
at that's at 11:30. I don't know if I'm even going to be awake for that.
I told you something that's going to be on that I've been looking forward to seeing because I've only seen it once in my entire life, and MeTV is going to show it tonight at 9:30. The first episode of Green Acres, and what makes this interesting is that when Green Acres first came on the air in 1966, a person who was very well known at the time, the moderator of the TV game show What's My Line, who was also in his own right a very, very good newsman, John Charles Daly. He is going to do on the first episode of Green Acres what has been called a mockumentary, a documentary actually detailing for everybody why this high priced lawyer in New York, Oliver Wendell Douglas, wants to take his wife, leave New York, and go to this weird little town, which we really aren't sure where exactly it is, called Hooterville, to start a brand new life as a farmer, plowing the fields in a three-piece suit and planting his corn with.
Green Acres is the
It's
place
the
to be.
first the first Green Acres ever aired, and it's going to be on tonight. For all of you who have Me TV, you might want to watch it. I'll be sitting in front of my TV set 9:30 tonight on Me TV, and of course Joe and I will be back here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock with the next round of Joe and Joe and maybe a rant or two. Y'all come back now. Yeah.
Here, wait, before you go, you just
Yeah.
reminded me. I want to see if you know this, okay? All right, the Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
Right. Granny was played by Irene
Irene.
Ryan.
Right.
Okay. What was Granny's first name?
Oh, you know what? I used to know this, and I remember I saw it on Wikipedia once.
I could give you a hint, but the hint I would give you, you'd get the answer.
Well, I could cheat here, and I can go on
No, no,
Wikipedia.
no, 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 no,
No,
no.
I'm not going to do that.
You know what? I never knew. I mean, I never knew that the character that Granny's name was actually mentioned in a particular episode, and it was the an episode involving the Drysdales next door. The wife, his father, was trying to woo Granny to go to Las Vegas with him. She thought he wanted to marry her. He wanted her to bankroll his gambling escapade that he was about to undergo. So he kind of made it sound like he was wanting to marry her.
Right.
Her name was Daisy.
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 Okay.
Anyway, I
And
just
Granny was Jed's mother-in-law.
mother-in-law.
Right.
Yes, because
Okay.
in those days, in the '60s and '70s, all men with children were widows. None of them were divorced. They were all widows.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, like Fred McMurray,
All right.
My Three Sons. Yeah.
Yes. And here's another thing, because I remember I loved My Three Sons as a kid. I watched an episode the other day, and it was one of the late episodes. So he's already married to Barbara, played by Beverly Garland.
Right.
And they had the little girl, daughter Dodie,
Dodie.
who's in her fifth, got to be well into her 50s now. Um, Now, at that point, Ron Grady, Rob Grady, who played Rob, okay,
Right.
the oldest son, I guess wanted to leave the series. So the way they wrote him out was that they sent him down to Peru to work building roads in the jungle.
Right. I remember that.
And Tina Cole, who played his wife, is left behind with
With Trip.
triplets.
Right.
Okay, and I'm just thinking in my, and she's there, she's living there in the house, and I'm thinking, who in their right mind? I mean, especially if you want to use, the mindset these days, but who in their right mind would write an episode where it would be believable, where the one of the a character that important to the show, they're going to write him out by sending him to Peru or something. And I guess it was a dilemma because they really couldn't kill him off. They had the triplets, and now suddenly he's like, I want to leave the show, and he leaves. I don't know the circumstances behind it, whether it was a contract dispute or he just got tired of playing the same role because he had been playing it since the very beginning.
Right.
But it just was sort of odd that you had to accept this fact that someone would leave their wife and triplets, intentionally choosing. Now I know soldiers do this all the time, and I'm not. Obviously that's a whole different situation. People that are in the military, but this was just a little bit far fetched to me. I don't know.
Well, in Hazel, didn't Don DeFore and Whitney Blake leave as Hazel made the transition from
From
NBC to
NBC to
CBS?
CBS, and the
And then
thing,
so Hazel and Bobby Buntrock, who played Don DeFore and Whitney Blake's son, ended up going to live with uh, the brother and the sister-in-law.
right, but there were contract issues after NBC ended the show. It was a after NBC had. I remember reading about it. I can't recall the exact details, but when they decided to move the show over to CBS, and the producers decided not to bring. That was an intentional thing, that they decided not to bring Don DeFore and Whitney Blake. And Whitney Blake, by the way, was quite a producer on her own right because she produced a One Day at a Time, I believe.
And her daughter was Meredith Baxter Burney.
Yes, yes. So it
And
was
you talk about My Three Sons. First, Bub, the grandfather, played by William
William
Frawley,
Frawley,
suddenly went to Ireland and disappeared forever.
right? And
And
William
then they
Frawley
brought in
died,
they brought in Uncle Charlie,
right?
and then there was the original third brother, Mike,
Yes, got married, and then it
got
was never
married.
heard from again. You
Never
never
heard from.
heard about.
He was the equivalent of Chuck from Happy Days.
Right,
You
because
know?
then Ernie Ernie,
Was was
was that
orphaned.
right? But there was Barry Livingston and I forgot the first name now. The two Livingston brothers,
Right.
Barry, and I don't know which one is Ernie, but the actor who played he was adopted. They
Right.
adopted him into the family. He was a
Correct.
friend of Chip's,
Correct.
and they adopted him. But yeah, you just never heard the first brother just got married and disappeared, and you never heard from them again. You never heard about him again.
I mean, you talk about Fred McMurray getting married to Barbara later on in the series, and in the episode where he got married, where's Mike? You'd think the son would come back
Right,
to see his father get married.
and
And Mike, by the way, Mike got married to Sally. Sally was played by Meredith McRae. They left the series, and then Meredith McRae became Billy Joe on Petticoat Junction.
exactly. Oh God, it's all so wretchedly complicated, isn't it? All right, so
Would be funny if the two of us left and we had two actors who came in to play Joe and Joe. Like the original Joe and Joe are gone, but we're going to continue the show with two different people.
well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to think of for actors um, to play us. If which actor would you pick to play you?
Oh,
Uh,
I would die. I would get Chris Amino to dye his hair silver, and he could play me.
oh, by the way, to give them a plug because Chris Sabino and John Marshall are doing they're doing Facebook Lives now. I've seen. I don't know if it's once a week or not, but if you
Really?
yeah, so if you happen to catch it, you're watching from home, give it a look. John Marshall and Chris Sabino on doing lives on Facebook, but I don't know what their schedule is. I did see them during the weekend, so maybe it's a once a week thing
And I'll be a
that they're
nice guy
doing.
and I'll give John Marshall a plug. John Marshall actually goes around and visits schools with a green screen, a camera, and a laptop computer, and allows kids to step in front of the camera and make believe that they're real live weathercasters, like he was and is actually. I think he's a part time at CBS. So he does a nice job going around the schools and doing that sort of thing. And good luck with that, John.
Yeah, John was very kind to me when I worked briefly over at Channel 4 back in 2008. So always wish him well. All right, let's end it, Joe. It's coming up on it's past 8:30. So you want to get ready for Green Acres.
That's
So
right.
kick your shoes off.
No,
Sit a
exactly. Go
spell.
keep
Um,
keep keep Manhattan, but give me that countryside.
correct.
And of
Uh,
course, at the end of every single Green Acres, you had the voice of Ava Gabor saying, "This has been a
this
children's
Filmways presentation,
presentation,
darling.
darling."
All right, all right, folks. Let's put an end to this. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. I know we kind of got sidetracked after we did weather and we went all over the place. You heard me rant. We talked about television. We'll be back tomorrow night. Updates throughout the day. Make sure you got the weather apps, and we will see you tomorrow. Good night.
Now you